All right, psychology nerds, and welcome to another episode of Psychology and Stuff, the podcast from Good Cause Productions at the University of Wisconsin, Green Bay. I'm your host, Alison Jane Martingano, and today I have the pleasure of welcoming back the founder of Psychology and Stuff himself, Dr. Ryan Martin. Dr. Martin is not only a psychology professor here at UW Green Bay, but he's also the Dean of the College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences. He's the executive producer of Psychology and Stuff, host of the Lantern podcast, and an acclaimed author of his recent book coming out, Emotion Hacks, in January. Many of you may know him as the Anger Professor. His research examines why people become angry, how anger can be expressed productively, and how we can better understand and work with angry individuals. All right. Wow. Woof. What a biography, Ryan.
Thank you very much. I think everybody should know what a good job you did recording that intro. Like one take, it was really impressive. I was sitting right here for it. I will tell you the producers know it takes me many takes.
I've heard that you're not so good at reading.
I'm terrible at reading. Much better at writing, apparently.
Well, yes. So we will definitely want to talk about your book, which I think is actually super relevant to what we'll be talking about today, which is about how positive emotions fade more quickly and negative emotions linger. Mm-hmm. So this is a really, I guess, personally relevant topic to me. And I'm going to tell you an anecdote that I may have told you before, so I apologize if I have. So I went to a therapist to complain about many things, but one of the things I complained about was I was feeling down and sad a lot. And one of the things she had me do was download an app that actually tracked how I was feeling. So this app like beeps randomly every hour or every couple of hours. And I just asks you, like, on a scale of 1 to 10, how are you doing? And you know me, I'm a data person. I love data. And I went back and I looked at the graphs, and it actually turned out I felt fine or okay or happy even quite a lot of the time. But my perception of the week was, this has been a really bad week. So I feel like that's the same thing, right? The sad lingering.
Yes, it's very similar. Can I comment on it real quick? Okay. So there's actually, this is really interesting because something similar happens, and there's been, and unfortunately I'm not going to be able to cite this, but there's some research that looks at how people react emotionally to things like vacations, right? And so they did something similar to what you're describing, but with people when they went on vacation. And what they found is that by and large, people, now it's sort of the opposite of what you're describing, is that after a vacation, people's report was much more positive of the experience than it was while they were there. And it's because our memory of emotions is not sort of a average of how we were feeling. It's the high points, right? We remember just sort of the overall vibe and not necessarily some of the specifics. So you don't remember like the time you spent waiting in line at the airport, unless it stands out for as exceptional. You don't remember, a bad meal you had or something like that, or sitting in a taxi for a long period of time. So what people tend to pick up on are some of those high points. And I think in this case, what you're describing is something similar, which is, you were reflecting on sort of low points potentially instead of the sort of the accuracy of how you were doing in a lot of those moments. Right.
So it's like reading student teaching evaluations and focusing in on the one super negative one and sort of ignoring all of the you did great class sort of situations.
I will admit, I find it hard to believe you've ever gotten a negative teaching evaluation.
Oh, you're very sweet. But I definitely have. And those are the ones that stick with you, right? It's like it's you ruminate and go over and over when someone criticizes you, but when someone compliments you, you just kind of brush it off and forget it straight away, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's what we're going to talk about today, because there's a recent study that came out just back in August this year from a team of researchers at UC Berkeley showing that these positive emotions are less likely to linger and the negative emotions are more likely to linger. So I wonder if you could start us off by describing that study.
Yeah, absolutely. So I love this study, and I think it's really fascinating and a really interesting method. So it's a paper that actually includes 2 different research projects in it, or 2 different studies in there, right? So what they did is that they showed people photos. It's part of what is called the IAPS, the International Affective Picture Set, which are pictures that have been demonstrated to elicit particular emotions, right? And there's tons of these photos that are used to elicit things like disgust or fear or anger, etc. And what they did is they showed people photos that were elicited positive emotions and photos that elicited negative emotions. And then they looked, and essentially what they did is in this first study is they showed people a bunch of these pictures, I think 10. They had people rate how positive they felt or how negative they felt. And then they took I think the 2 from each category that led to the most intense feelings, and they showed them again to them several times, right? And then what you would expect in that situation is for the feelings to sort of dissipate, right? It's the same reason if you hear the same joke 10 times in a row, you don't keep laughing every time. Eventually, it's not that funny anymore. And the same thing would happen with these photos, that the emotion they elicit would decrease over time. But what they found is that, and that process is called habituation, right? When we get used to something, an emotion, or in this case, affective habituation, we get used to an emotion and it dissipates. So what they found, though, is that they essentially found 2 things in this first part of the study. They found that the emotion dissipated more quickly for positive emotions than for negative emotions. So those negative emotions tended to linger a little bit. The other thing they found, though, is that people who were anxious, not as part of the study, but just people who were anxious going into the study, the positive emotions left more quickly. And so that anxiety predicted how quickly those positive emotions would go away. It didn't necessarily change how long the negative emotions lasted, but it predicted the positive emotions going away.
Yeah. Well, hey, that is a great summary, and I'm gonna have to wind back a little bit to ask you a little bit more about it. So these pictures that they're viewing. So I was trying to look at some of them, and they're like pictures of a couple hugging, or people snowboarding or skiing for the happy ones, and then they've got sad ones of like people who are upset or crying and things like that. And so they're showing this image multiple times and asking people, how are you feeling? Like you say, it seems kind of obvious, I guess. Right. Oh, right. So I see this happy picture. At first, it makes me really happy, but then it kind of gets boring and doesn't make me as happy after time. But I guess what you're pointing out is the difference between, okay, so we get bored of images over time, but we essentially, for the fast ones, that they don't keep us happy as long. Right. And the sad ones, that we still get sad looking at a sad image. Is that, am I getting that right?
Yep. So maybe we can talk about the evolutionary piece here. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, because I'm a skeptic about this, so I want to hear what you think. Okay. So this is an explanation for why, right? Yep. That somehow this is evolutionarily beneficial.
Yep. So I am very much on board with the idea that our emotions exist because they solved an evolutionary problem. And what you see is that with most, so I sometimes get uncomfortable with the idea that we have negative and positive emotions. I'm just going to say that right now.
Okay.
Now I do use that language a lot. So just so we're clear, like I use that language a lot, but I do think that we should probably, like a better framing of it would be negative feeling emotions or positive feeling emotions, because I don't actually think the emotion is negative.
In the sense it can still be useful.
Absolutely. That I mean, in the pain metaphor is a great example. Hunger is another example. Thirst is another example. Like, these are mechanisms that your body uses to signal something to you. Right. And your fear is a signal that there might be a threat. Your anger is a signal that there might be a provocation, or you might be being treated unfairly. And so the negative emotions, or the negative feeling emotions that we tend to experience, typically are a response to a particular type of danger stimulus, right? So I just mentioned a couple of them, but some others. Disgust is a response to a contamination, something that could harm you. Sadness is a reaction to loss, whether it's loss of a relationship or loss of a thing. Jealousy is a reaction to a potential threat to your relationship. So all of these feelings, they serve a purpose, essentially. They alert you to something that is wrong, and then they energize you to deal with that, right? So the physiological increase that we experience when we're scared or angry or even sad alerts us, or energizes us to do something about it. But the question then is, well, so what purpose do positive emotions serve? Like, what is the specific thing that they are helping us with, helping us solve? And that's a little less clear. One is, you could say, well, obviously, like, from a relationship perspective, like, hey, this is a person that I enjoy spending time with, and because I have fun, it makes me want to spend more time with them. And so
a reinforcement reward kind of make us do it again because it was fun. Like the feeling of being satiated after eating makes me feel full, and I feel happy, so I continue eating.
Yes, exactly. So it serves that purpose. One of the things we see with emotions, though, is with positive emotions, is that they actually, more than that, what they do is they open us up to different perspectives. It's called the broaden and build theory of emotions, and so or different ideas. And so we're more creative, and we perform better on tasks when we're in a good positive mood. So they seem to help sort of solve a problem that way. But from a survival perspective, which is what evolution is going to be all about, from a survival perspective, it would make sense that negative emotions would linger a little bit longer because they exist to keep you alive. They exist to help you survive in those moments. And so they should be more powerful from that perspective.
All right. So the idea is, because these are essentially more useful emotions for indicating risk or any threat to survival, we need them to last longer.
Yes.
So we've evolved to feel kind of crummy a lot of the time, is what you're telling me.
That is the downside. Yeah, we've evolved. Yeah, it's one way of saying it. We've evolved to feel negatively because they serve that valuable purpose.
All right, so I'm going to push back on the skeptical side now, because as a social psychologist, I'm very well. Let's say I'm a difficult person to sell the evolutionary story to, and I'll say why. So my concern is that, so if we hypothesize that emotions are serving some early evolutionary function, but we can't go back in time, right, and figure out exactly what selection pressures were working on us back then. We don't know for sure how this evolved. We're just sort of assuming that this emotion would have been useful for something that seems like a sensible or rational idea. And I would argue that maybe there are more social or cognitive explanations for this. So say maybe we have learned that this emotion is useful. Maybe we've learned perhaps that smiling brings people to us and we like that. Or maybe we've learned that when we're sad, that induces people to care for us. And so does it have to be something that's wired into our biology, or could it just be something we've learned?
It is probably both, and I would certainly argue that. Here's some pretty compelling data, though, and you're right from a perspective of we don't know what the selection pressures might have been. So normally I would do this with a classroom full of people. I can't do that right now, so I'll just do this with one person.
Okay.
So, are you afraid of spiders? So imagine a classroom full of people. You would know that about...
Most people would say, I'm actually more afraid of ants, which is a whole other story. But go with the spiders. I also don't like snakes.
Okay, so spiders, like when you rank the commonness of phobias, the things at the top of the list are things like spiders, snakes, rodents, other types of insects.
But shouldn't it be like things that can eat us, like tigers and lions?
Sure, except that early ancestors, those things were the threats. What about electric outlets? What about cars? Like modern things that can actually kill us, people tend not to be afraid of in the same way.
Okay.
There's far more fear, like legit phobias of spiders or rodents that carry disease than there are of knives or guns or things like that. So we call this biological preparedness that like, and it sort of combines both our perspectives here. We are predisposed to be afraid of particular things, but then our learning history really informs how likely we are to react negatively to those things, right?
Okay.
So, and we can of course give someone a phobia to anything, right? I mean, we've
ants.
Yep. there's got to be a story there. What's the story?
All right. So the very quick story, and they can cut this out post-production if they don't like it. I went on a trip to Zambia where they have army ants. And in the middle of the night, someone woke us all up knocking on our tents telling us the army ants are coming, the army ants are coming. And we had to light a circle of fire around the camp to prevent the ants from coming straight through the camp. And in the process of me panicking, half asleep, trying to light fire, I set my trousers on fire.
Oh, okay.
So really, I guess it's more of a fear of fire, perhaps.
Yeah.
But the ants got caught up in this fear. And so the ants are coming through, and I'm trying to close this gap between these two fire walls. And I'm desperately trying to do it, and I'm catching fire. And then the ants are coming. And then for some reason, I thought that if I was on fire, then the ants wouldn't get. It was a lot of bad decision making
happening.
Of the
night.
In the middle of the night, all at the same time. In a foreign country, didn't know what I was doing. I was fine. In the end, it worked out great.
There you go. But so chances are you were, because ants are insects, you were predisposed to be afraid of them, and then a traumatic event there
added it on. Now I just can't stand even just regular Wisconsin ants that I hear are harmless. Yeah, so definitely we can learn a phobia, right? Yep. So that's a learned phobia, maybe with a little bit of biological predisposition woven in. But I do get your point that, okay, we have to teach our children not to touch the outlet. And we have to teach our children not to run in front of a car. But we don't necessarily teach them to be scared of a spider, and yet they already are. Yes.
In fact, we have to sometimes actively discourage fears of some of those things, right? And so like when my kids were little, I would play with spiders in front of them to try and model for them, like, hey, this is a thing you don't need to be scared of.
But this claim is going a little bit further than that, right? So it's not that the fear of certain animals or threats evolved, but the fear itself evolved. The ability to have emotion. Is it? Here, this is getting off topic, but is it that kind of emotion present in all species? Is this something we find universally?
Yeah. Well, so there's fear is actually sort of more than just one thing. And so because what we certainly would relate to fear or think of as part of the fear response that is actually sort of neurologically a little bit different is the startle response, which so the startle response we essentially will see in any and every species that exists of anything, right? And so, and that's ultimately one piece that we can measure in just about anything, right? I mean, you can make a loud noise and see how an ant reacts to it, Or,
yes, I gotta try that.
so, and we know that the startle response is pretty much universal. So do we know if fear is universal? That one's a little harder to claim just because there are elements of a quote unquote fear response that are pretty subjective. But what we can see is that species tend to respond in one of two ways when they're afraid. They either flee or they freeze. And so, which we call behavioral inhibition, right? It's when, I think about this a lot this time of year in Wisconsin, like a deer, if it hears a noise, it'll sort of pause and look, and then makes a decision essentially about, is this something I should run from, or is this something that it's actually safer for me to stand perfectly still? My dog does this a lot too. Like she'll hear a noise. Sometimes she just startles and runs. Sometimes she will just sort of freeze and look as if to say, is this something that is an actual threat or not?
Okay. So you're slowly bringing me around to, I wouldn't say I was fully on board, but I'm more convinced that maybe there's a evolutionary rooting to this emotion. And so the logic here is that because these negative emotions are more useful to us, they linger for longer.
Yes.
But let's unpack this a little bit about anxiety. So you mentioned that they did 2 studies, and I think in the second one is where they actually really dug into this idea of anxiety by making people do a public speaking task to make them anxious. So tell me about that.
Yeah, so they had an intervention prior to. So in study 2, they essentially did something very, very similar, but they had a couple of tweaks. One is they had more participants. Two is they standardized the pictures. So remember in the last version, they picked the pictures that people were most afraid of or most negative, responded to most intensely. This time, they didn't do that. They just had the same pictures for both groups. But the other thing that they did is that they gave them an anxiety task in advance. And they actually tried to have two groups. This part didn't quite work out the way they wanted it to. One group was told that they were going to talk about their dream job, like a public speaking thing for two experts. The other group, and that they had to prepare for. The other group just had to write about their dream job for a few minutes. When I say it didn't quite work is that they found that the two groups weren't actually that different on anxiety. So instead what they did is they just considered both of those to be like anxiety inducers. And then they looked to see how anxious the person was and how well it predicted their the outcome or the dissipation of emotions. And they found that the more anxious you were from that task, the quicker those positive emotions went away.
Yeah. Yeah. So this one really speaks to me. So I've been diagnosed with anxiety. And I'm also, as we've talked about maybe before, somewhat of a pessimist. And so I'm wondering if this explains something about me, right? So if anxious people hold on to these negative emotions for longer, like that sounds like it's explaining my life.
Yeah, I mean, that would be true because essentially, I mean, at least in this study, what they're finding is that those positive feelings, it actually explains that story you told a little bit too. You know, those positive experiences we have, they just don't tend to last as long, but the negative ones essentially stay.
Hang on, but then if we argue that this is an evolutionary benefit, is that suggesting that I'm more evolutionarily adaptive, that anxious people we would have done better living in the Serengeti?
Potentially. I mean, it would argue the problem we have, and this is because the circumstances we evolved in are different from the circumstances we currently live in. Some of the things we inherited don't necessarily serve us the same way. And most importantly, I think that's particularly true of the behaviors that we would have once engaged in to deal with these feelings. So in other words, I mentioned like when you're scared, the response is to flee.
Not as useful in a business meeting.
Yep.
As hunting, perhaps.
Yes,
yeah,
exactly. So, you know, if you've got test anxiety and as soon as you get the test, you just run out of the room, right? It's not going to serve you. Same thing when we think about anger, you know, the response was to fight. And, you know, while there are certainly many people who do that, by and large, we know that there's other more adaptive pro-social ways of dealing with and expressing anger. And so some of the things we want to do in those, and this is the biggest challenge, the things we want to do that we're driven to do in those circumstances, they simply don't serve us the way they once did. We actually have to, in some ways, fight against our nature to act in an appropriate way.
Is it also possible then that it sort of turns into a negative feedback loop? So you're feeling these negative emotions longer if you're an anxious person, which then in turn makes you more anxious?
Yep. Yes. Yeah. I mean, and I think in some ways that's why one of the reasons it's important to talk about and discover things like this, because it makes sense now to think, okay, so what are the interventions? Like, what are the things I can do if what I want is to make those positive feelings linger longer? What are things I can do to try and do that?
I love that segue because that's going to take me right into my next question. What do we do with this? Because when I'm reading it and it's talking about evolution, it makes it sound like, well, this is just the way we are. Like,
right.
Oh man, as I mentioned, we're just designed to feel bad a lot of the time. So, firstly, how can we fix this? And secondly, I guess, should we? I mean, if we've evolved this for an adaptive reason, is the aim to eliminate this process?
Yeah, great question. So I'm going to start with the second question.
Go for it.
And that is the should we. I think what I always try to tell people about their emotions is to be more intentional about how you're experiencing them and what you're doing with them. And I don't know that I would never want anyone to get away from the fact that that they should be angry sometimes, or that they should be sad sometimes, or should be anxious, or even should be jealous. Like, all of those feelings exist for a reason, and it's good that we feel them. The questions then are, when are we feeling them? Why are we feeling them? What do we do when we're feeling them? What do we channel them into? There's a billion, what I think are great questions that you can ask yourself after that, and that those questions can essentially help you navigate like your emotion management. And so a big part of what I try to tell people is to think about emotion management much, much more broadly than just feel or not feel.
Right. Yeah. Because I think a lot of people do default to assuming that emotion management is just emotion suppression.
Yes.
It's just
Yep.
push it all away. But you don't argue for that,
Nope.
right? Like
Nope.
it's about healthy embrace. I'm paraphrasing your book here, which I'm gonna have to hold up to the camera
Yes,
here.
please.
So everybody to see. So in Emotion Hacks, and there's 50 hacks in
Yes.
here?
Yep.
50 hacks. So would you say that, and I'm going to ask you to tell us all what's in your book here, but is it more focused on curtailing and shortening the experience of negative emotions, or lengthening the experience of positive ones, or both, or neither?
It's a little bit of both.
Okay.
So, but first I want to go back and answer the question I didn't answer yet.
You did.
Yes.
Sorry.
So that's all right. So the question was, thinking about that study, how can we intervene, right? So I would say there's two things. One, and this actually does, dovetail or connect to stuff in the book. One is, if we know anxiety leads to us being less likely to experience positive emotions or experience them for a short amount of time, well, then that's one of the interventions. We can embrace strategies to decrease our anxiety in the moment, right? That's going to lead to, and that's not too surprising, but that's going to lead to positive emotions lingering a little bit longer.
Okay.
The other piece is we can be really much more intentional about trying to remember and experience those positive emotions. That, like, for me, the knowledge that those things are fleeting makes me want to dig in a little bit when I feel them in the first place, right? And so it's sort of this good thing happened. I want to live in this moment for a little bit and be really intentional about living in that moment instead of letting it move on. And so that's a way in which we can use that information to try and shift how we experience and express our feelings. Now, to get back to kind of what the goal of the book is, I actually think that really nicely connects to what I'm trying to do, which is, and the book is laid out with one long chapter that explains how and why we feel. So how do we experience and express emotions in our day-to-day life?
You said long, but you don't mean boring, right?
No.
You just mean detailed.
Yes, much longer than the rest of the chapters, right? Because there's 50 other chapters after that one. Yes, so one detailed chapter on how and why we feel. And then there's 50 strategies rooted in that model, everything from stay hydrated to, channel it into problem solving, that are designed to help people sort of manage their emotions in their day-to-day life.
My mom will love that one. She's always been telling me to drink more water.
Good.
As long as I can remember. Okay, you'll have to clue me in. How does that help me manage my emotions?
Yes. So we know. So there's a lot of research that says that even mild dehydration affects your mood. And so you are more likely to feel down and to react negatively when you are provoked or experience a stimulus just because of mild dehydration. Yeah.
Wow. No wonder I'm cranky. All right. That's so telling. I do want to zone in. So we've called this book, I've not. You've called this book Emotion Hacks. Now, to me, hack means like a short thing, a temporary thing. But Is that the aim, that these are like quick and easy, or is it more like long-term habit building?
Great question. So the idea and what I'm trying to get people away from is the idea of thinking that emotion management is about making big life changes.
Okay.
It can be, but by and large, it's actually about embracing potentially lots of little habits that things like drinking more water, things like spending time in nature, things like engaging with the arts, but also some bigger things like, I would argue it's awfully hard to change some of our longstanding thought patterns and the habits we have around how we tend to think about things and interpret things. But so those things aren't necessarily easy to do, but I do think that they're also not like what people oftentimes think, which is I'll be happy when I have a different job, or I'll be happy when I've moved to a different place, or I'll be happy when I graduate. It's like what I need is some massive life change, and that if I have that life change, then everything will be better. Or I'll be happy once I've just engaged in like this massive life, not just a significant event, but just like if I just did things completely differently, I'd be a happier person. Those big changes are hard to sustain, and so trying to embrace lots of little things is more manageable.
And I'm assuming you're not advocating that people try and do all 50 at the same time.
No, I want people to think of it as a menu. I want every chapter. So the reason I refer to the first chapter as a long chapter is that most of them are like 3 pages long. They are intentionally short. The idea is, frankly, that if a person was reading through and they said, I am not interested in this one, they would skip it and move on to the next one.
All right.
I'm also thinking that if people, that maybe they've read it, that they've moved on or whatever, that at some point they might go back to some parts and say, oh yeah, I once read whatever, and go back to it. And so it's designed to be sort of part book you read straight through, but also part kind of reference book that people can go back to. So it could
work as like a coffee table book. You pick it up, you open any page, and you get a little nugget of
exactly.
An idea there.
Yeah.
Are they prioritized at all so that, you really should start with one and then 50?
They're organized based on kind of how we experience emotions. So I have some that are kind of rooted in the types of stimuli we experience day in and day out, some that are rooted in our mood at the time that we experience stimuli, some that are rooted in our thought patterns, that sort of thing. Yeah,
so thought patterns. So you talk a lot about cognitive reappraisal, right?
Yes.
I was thinking about that in relation to the study we've been talking about. Mm-hmm. Is it possible to use something like that to, you say like focusing in and being in the moment? Mm-hmm. Is that more of our thoughts around our emotions? So say I'm feeling happy, is to then think about being happy? Like, how do you use that to make these happy emotions or these positive emotions linger longer?
Yeah. I mean, I think one of them is being like doing your best to be really present in those moments, right? And doing your best to really like pay attention. I'm going to think about like, I'm going to pick a happy memory. So for our family, Christmas morning, right? Watching the kids open up presents or something like that, like that's a thing that it actually could happen really quickly. It's a thing that, and oftentimes I think the kids want it to happen really quickly. But for me to actually take time in those moments to really pay attention to the kids' reactions to things, to think about it and reflect on it afterwards, all of those are ways that I can sort of solidify that positive emotional experience and make sure it does linger. It also means, one of the things we know, this is actually one of the studies I talk about in the book, is that our things we imagine and our memories of events can really induce the same feelings as experiencing it. And so just the fact that I remember so well my kids opening up gifts, and the fact that I can think so like that I can actually like replay those moments in my mind, mean that I can go back to it and regain those positive feelings whenever I want. And so that's a way that we can try and pull those things in and allow those experiences to linger a little bit.
Yeah, so I'm thinking, because it's not too far from Christmas season again for us, and I'm thinking, yeah, if I want to be able to pull on that memory in future, then on Christmas morning this year, I need to pay attention to how I'm feeling, what I'm seeing, the smells, the sounds, so that I can pull them all back another time and replay them in my mind.
Yes, exactly. I mean, and that's the thing, like just saying, like, I want to take in every moment here, or every part of this moment, and being intentional about that will allow you to pull it back much more readily.
Yeah, that's fantastic. All right, I'm about to be fully sold on this idea, so I'm going to deliberately try and be a skeptic here.
Okay.
So here I'm putting on my skeptic face, and
I appreciate it. Yep.
All right. So how do we make sure that this sort of embrace of these positive emotions doesn't turn into some kind of toxic positivity?
Yeah, so a great question, and something, it's funny. I think one of the things I'm just noticing online, it came up for me just this weekend. Yeah. One of the things I'm noticing online is that people are so averse to like toxic positivity that they see it even where it's not, right? And so I had a reaction where I posted a study about how exercise actually exacerbates a lot of angry feelings. Like when you exercise when you're angry, it makes those angry feelings worse.
I remember you telling me about this before.
Yeah.
Don't go for a run when you're mad.
No. Unless you want to stay mad, and in which case you should.
Fair enough.
I bring that up because that has been a lot of people's reaction to this online, is they say, not all anger is bad. And I'm like, yeah, no, I know. Like I did a whole TED talk on that very concept. Like I'm on board. But if people want to decrease their anger, then exercising is a mistake. And so what I want people to hear is the book isn't intended to be just purely, here's how you alleviate negative feelings. It's to be about, here's how you manage your emotions more broadly. Here is the purpose they serve in your life. Here is how you can increase feelings of happiness. But also, and I say this, this is something I talk to my kids about all the time, like, part of what you need to do to be an emotionally mature person is figure out what emotion you want to feel in a certain situation and then help yourself get there. And so there might be times when being angry is the right feeling, or where that will serve you. Well, then you want to know how to make yourself angry. And if you can do that, or we talked about, anxiety serving people in some mild anxiety in some performance situations and things like that. Well, how do you induce just a little bit of that, but also scale back if it goes too far, so that you're actually getting those benefits?
Yeah.
That's emotion management in its, I think, healthiest way.
Yeah, so you described your book as a menu, but I'm hearing it more like a cookbook, right? Ooh. You're like, here are the different recipes you can make, but if you don't want apple pie right now, don't make apple pie right now.
Yes.
Because it seems to be that people are assuming that all of these hacks that you're talking about, they should use all of them all the time.
Right.
But it's more like, pick the one that serves you in the moment.
Yes.
If you're not hungry for this dish, don't make this dish.
I love that. That was great. You should be my publicist. That's fantastic.
It's the next book's title. It's going to be your cookbook.
Yes.
Martha Stewart, Eat Your Heart Out. It's going to be fantastic.
That is great.
Well, thank you so much for joining me, Ryan. I do want to ask you one last question.
Please.
If there was one more hack you could add into the book now post-publication, what would it be? Yeah,
so it's so funny you say that, because I was thinking, you let me know you were going to ask that question.
I did.
And,
I prepped you.
Yep. And I didn't have a good answer for it. But honestly, as we've been talking about it, one of the things that I would say is the thing that we were talking about before is, like, immerse yourself in those moments you want to savor. Like, truly just immerse yourself in those moments. We talk about grounding a lot as a mechanism people use, and I do talk about grounding in the book, right? Which is, when you're feeling anxious, pay attention to 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, whatever, and work your way down. We do that to help people sort of de-escalate when they're anxious. I think there's a world where that is a useful tool in those positive moments. Like, if right now I want to remember everything about this, well, I should pay attention to 5 things I can see, 4 things I can hear, and really dig into those moments in a positive way.
Hang on, man. I thought we were wrapping up, but I got to ask a follow-on about that because, hang on, if for anxiety it pulls you out of the anxiety, wouldn't it pull you out of the positive emotion too?
I mean, I suppose you wouldn't want to do it in that way. Now, the difference is, and this is super important, and I'm thinking through this as you're saying it. So when you're anxious, the 5 things you can see, those aren't 5 things that make you anxious. They're 5 things in your environment that'll help you feel like in place. The flip side of that would be if there are 5 things I want to remember. If I'm enjoying my Christmas morning and I want to ground myself in that moment, well, I should pay attention to 5 things that are making me happy. 4 things I can hear that are making me happy, right? The sound of my kids laughing, the crackle of the fire, even the hum of our Christmas lights.
Oh man, you're making me really want Christmas to come. But I think I understand it. So anxiety is when we're having a fear essentially for something that's not grounded in the world around us. And so by focusing in the world around us, that pulls us out of the anxiety. If presumably we're about to be attacked by a tiger, focusing on the tiger and the fact that it's very scary would not reduce our anxiety.
No, nor should you want it to. Right.
So it's more that emotion doesn't fit the surroundings. Whereas when we're happy because we're in a happy environment, then focusing on the environment only serves to enhance that happiness.
Exactly. Really nicely said.
Oh, anytime you want to give me a job, Ryan, you just let me know. Well, thank you so much again for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been fantastic.
Psychology and Stuff is brought to you by Good Cause Productions at the University of Wisconsin, Green Bay. The executive producer is Ryan Martin, the production manager is Rachel Sankey, and our creative director is Jenny Young. The media engineer for this episode is Rachel Sankey, supported by our technical director, Al Kloon. Special thanks to my guest today, Dr. Ryan Martin. If you haven't already, please make sure to rate, review, and subscribe to us on your favorite podcast platform. I'm your host, Alison Jane Martingano. Keep being amazing.